Hi everyone, happy Saturday. If you guys don't know me already, my name is Matt, I'm 22. I'm a graphic designer and photographer based in Montreal. And I have OCD and I talk about it openly on my Instagram page, Words Hug, which originally was kind of like a small advocacy project that I wanted to start doing, but I'm currently expanding it into a larger project. Anyways, that's for another video. But today I wanted to tell my story for my first YouTube video, and I'm not as nervous as I thought I would be, to be honest. I feel like it's because I've told this story quite a few times before. I told it on my Instagram page about a couple of months ago, I think, and the response was great and it was amazing, and I met so many amazing people through that experience, but I still feel like I need to share it on another platform. Just as a side note, I also struggle with dermatillomania, body dysmorphia, and generalized anxiety disorder. But I would say that for me personally, OCD has been the most debilitating in my life, and it's what I struggle with the most. But I definitely also have a list of other disorders going on. So yeah, I guess I'll start out by just saying that I can pinpoint obsessive tendencies back to when I was about, I feel like every time I tell this story, it's a different age, but anyways, I'm just gonna pick 10 years old. I remember being very hyper aware of my body and the ways that my body operates. So for example, I would be very aware of my heartbeat, and I'd be like obsessed about it, and I'd be so scared that I would just be aware of it for the rest of my life. And I would just be focused on my heartbeat the whole time when I was in bed, and I would just like lay there and not fall asleep because I would like focus on it so hard. And so then that kind of morphed into a fear of never sleeping, which I still deal with. It's still a fear that I struggle with like every single day. I'm so scared that I'm never going to sleep again and that I just can keep myself awake. I also had a lot of little kind of obsessive tendencies here and there. Like when I would cross the street, I would have to like wave at random cars. I would have to step on like specific lines on the street. I would also have to confess a lot of things to my mom. Like if something happened at school where like I got in trouble, I would have to tell my mom. And it was this urge of like, I need to tell her everything. I need to get her, I need to get this off of my chest. Now that I look back, I'm just trying to think of more things that I had when I was a kid. There's definitely a lot more I just forgot. I would have kind of like weird thoughts here and there of being in the car and seeing the window roll up, and I was so scared that I would impulsively stick my fingers in there and get them caught. I would like obsess about whether I would just do it. And I was really young, guys. Like this was like, I don't know, I'm pretty sure this was before 10 years old. I remember thinking those things, and I was like really, really young. So I think it goes back, I think it must have been about 6 years old. Now that I look back, those things are definitely OCD. Like it's definitely the beginning of a disorder that would, magnify and blow up for me. But back in the day, obviously, you don't think of those things as a legitimate disorder, right? Things started getting really bad, really, really bad about 2 years ago. I was in my kitchen, I was cutting vegetables, and I had this passing thought about stabbing myself. And this thought was something that I like had probably had in the past, right? Everyone gets random thoughts here and there that just come in and bother you. But when you don't have OCD, you can just thank your brain for sharing and move on, right? Like you recognize that this thought is not part of your value system. It's not what you want for yourself. Because you had a thought that you're gonna stab yourself doesn't mean you actually want to stab yourself, right? But with OCD, we don't understand that. Our brain doesn't connect the dots. We don't understand that having a thought about something really scary doesn't mean that you're gonna do it, that it's about you, that it's blah, blah, blah. We don't know those things until we get the proper help. And so I got this passing thought about stabbing myself, and it was like something in my brain snapped. It snapped. It's the only way I can describe it. And it's funny because like a lot of us describe our experience in the same way. Like, a lot of us are like, yeah, I accessed this other part of my brain when I got this first thought, or like, I just snapped. I just experienced this other level of anxiety that I had never experienced before. It was like this wave of like terror throughout my body. And what it told me was to protect myself, right? When you get this much anxiety, when your fight or flight reaction is set off, all you want to do is protect yourself. Obviously, there is no danger. And that's the thing with OCD is we know that these thoughts are not part of our value system. And that's why they bother us so much. I know that I didn't want to kill myself. I know that I didn't want to leave my family behind. I know that I didn't want to see my name in the newspaper, Matthew Parisian killed himself. Those scenarios terrified me. And this is why I felt like I had to protect myself from that possibility of it happening. And it sounds so irrational, right? Like, why would you spend your whole life protecting yourself from something that doesn't align with your values, right? OCD. That's what OCD is. I threw out the knife. I brought the bag to the hospital. Sorry, not to the hospital. I brought the bag to the park. The hospital's coming later. I brought the bag to the park and threw it out at the park so that I was far away from me, came back home and basically just bawled my eyes out. From that point on, it was nonstop thinking about suicide for the next 2 years, every single day. Protecting myself from killing myself, avoiding every single place that would potentially lead to that. So I was avoiding the metro. I was avoiding, we call it the metro in Montreal, but subway. I was avoiding bridges. I was avoiding knives. I was hiding all of my medication because I was too scared. I would just impulsively swallow them in my sleep. What else was I avoiding? I was avoiding even cars. And I was just like doing anything I could to just protect myself from doing something impulsively. Having suicidal OCD is not the same thing as being suicidal. I'm not going to go into what separates the two into detail because that's maybe for another video. And it could also be a compulsion for a lot of people. But suicidal OCD is when you're afraid of suicide. It does not mean you are suicidal. It does not mean you want to kill yourself. It means you are scared of killing yourself. It means you have OCD. It means you have a mental illness. A lot of people that have suicidal OCD want to know what separates suicidal OCD from being actually suicidal so that they can make sure they're not suicidal, which is a compulsion, right? But I think it's important to differentiate the two for people that don't understand what pure OCD is, because when we first hear about these tough topics and once we first start to, have conversations about suicide and all these, very taboo topics that OCD often latches onto, I think it's really important that we clear up the air. This is a mental illness that needs to be taken seriously. And a lot of people don't know about pure OCD, and this is why I'm doing what I do. Anyways, so let me just continue with my story. So basically for the next 2 years, I was doing everything I could to protect myself from killing myself. And so at a certain point, when you're thinking about these things 24/7, for years and years on end, for me, it took 2 years to find help. For some people, it takes 20 years, 30 years, 45 years. I mean, I can't imagine spending that much time suffering. But for me, it took 2, and I just reached this point where my thoughts by then had sort of morphed from suicidal obsessions to existential kind of questioning. What's the meaning of life? No one wants to think about these things, right? But when you have OCD, you do everything you can to figure out the answer. But in reality, there is no answer to any of these questions that you're trying to figure out. I reached this point where I just felt so hopeless. By then, I was actually suicidal. By then, unfortunately, sad for me because I was so terrified of killing myself, but it did kind of morph into an actual I did become actually suicidal by that point, because after 2 years of thinking about suicide 24/7, you're bound to become depressed. I was so hopeless. I literally was like, there was nothing I could do. While I was obsessing and doing compulsions and, just ruminating all the time, I was also looking for help. I was not just suffering, I was looking for help. I had reached out to therapists, multiple, I'm talking like dozens of therapists. I had gone to multiple psychiatrists, and no one was able to help. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which I do have, but no one was able to pinpoint what I was dealing with. And that's because OCD is misunderstood. And so after 2 years of looking for help, nothing working, doing some talk therapy, which wasn't helpful, I went to the hospital. I hospitalized myself. I was like, listen, this doesn't make any sense. I told my parents about everything. I'd love to talk about my experience talking to my parents about it, but that's for another video as well. I went to the ER. I was like, listen, it's either I go to the hospital or die. And going to the hospital was not the best experience. It's not fun, right? No one wants to go to the hospital, period. But to go to the psych ward is really just, a lot of people have different, things to say about it. For me personally, I really didn't enjoy it. It wasn't a fun experience. I did meet a lot of amazing people. All I wanted to do was find help. All I wanted to do was to feel understood, and people could find, and I just wanted someone to be like, yeah, we can finally help you. It's not what I got. I spent about a day there. I slept there, and I was questioned endlessly. They were literally so confused with my situation. They just wanted to know. They thought I was hiding something and that I was actually suicidal and I wasn't telling them. And you can imagine, for someone who's terrified of suicide, for someone to be like, okay, but are you suicidal? Questioning these things, they alarm you so much. There is no level of, this is a fear that is ingrained inside of your brain. You have to understand, there's nothing that scared me more ever in my whole entire life than suicide. I was terrified of it. Whenever I would hear stories of it in the news, whenever I would scroll on Instagram and see someone's story of their friend committed suicide or something, I would close my phone, I would have to ruminate and tell myself, okay, you're not going to do it, going over it and over it. They were trying to get information out of me that just wasn't there. And I was telling them very clearly, I was like, listen, I have this irrational fear of killing myself, and they just didn't get it. They didn't get it. They had no idea what was going on. And they basically let me go after a day with, I don't want to say no plan, but basically no plan. It was I would have rather just not go, to be honest. I left feeling worse than I did going in. It was not the best experience. And yet I'm still happy I went through it, because it shows me as to what extent this disorder is misunderstood. It is absolutely ridiculous. But anyways, not gonna start getting pissed off. So I left the hospital. I remember going home feeling so bad. And I decided to just Google my symptoms. And here's the thing with OCD, often we avoid Googling because we're scared that it'll show up in the symptom list that we actually are suicidal. Basically, Chrissy saved my life. Seriously. If I looked up suicidal thoughts, all these crisis helplines would show up, all this information about suicidality would show up, and I knew that I wasn't suicidal, but I was scared of that possibility. Anyways, honestly, it's hard to explain what goes on inside of our brains, but that's basically what goes on. So I decided to finally Google it. And I came across a YouTube video by Chrissy Hodges, who I adore. She is my everything. She is a peer support specialist and resource consultant / mental health advocate, who also runs a peer support group called OCD Peers, and I came across her video, which was called Suicidal OCD. And I was literally shook to the core. And so many of us, it's the same story. Like, we go to the hospital, we can't find help, we come back home, and we don't know what to do. Like, it's this feeling of just like, I'm gonna have to spend the rest of my life like this. I am so tired. It was the most depressing, it was the most depressing time of my life. And I'm glad to share it. I'm so happy that I'm able to share this story because, like, I just can't imagine the amount of people that are going through the same thing. And I just really want you to know, if this is you, and if you're, you know, really suffering and you couldn't find help for so long, or if you're coming across this video and this is the first time you hear about Puro, you are not alone. You're not alone. There are, I mean, I don't know what the numbers are, but there are so many people that deal with this, so common. And it's never spoken about because the themes that pervade OCD are so taboo. Pure OCD is basically when you have obsessions that are usually of a violent, kind of taboo, blasphemous kind of nature, and your compulsions are all in your head. So it's basically thought neutralization, rumination, avoidance, you know, all of these are mental compulsions. So it all happens inside of your head. And that's also why it's misunderstood. It's because you can't see it, right? To treat OCD, you need to go to an OCD specialist. So many people say they treat OCD and they don't. Talk therapy for OCD does not work. It does not work. The gold standard for OCD is exposure and response prevention, more generally cognitive behavioral therapy. You can go to iocdf.org, the International OCD Foundation. They have a list of therapists that can be in your area, and if not, then a lot of therapists do teletherapy, which I'm personally doing right now. Just to finish my story, from there on, and I was able to eventually get help. I procrastinated therapy for a very long time, which I don't recommend this, but I just felt more comfortable being in my compulsions and not facing my fears, and that's why I never went into therapy. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people with OCD don't go into therapy, but that's just one of them. But at least I was able to have the comfort of, okay, this is a disorder. I have something wrong with me. I have an illness that I can treat. I am not insane. I'm not crazy. I'm not the only one in the world. There was nothing as bad as feeling that way. And I would never wish it upon anybody. So yeah, this was just a quick overview of my story. I'm so excited to start sharing more things on this channel. I'm not really sure what direction I'm taking, but I think I'm gonna be just sharing everything OCD, everything generalized anxiety, everything dermatillomania, body dysmorphia. I just wanna open up conversations and raise awareness and hopefully reach more people. So, love you guys so much. Follow me on Instagram if you want. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I never thought I'd be saying this, but I am. And yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. Mwah. Love you guys.